Hell yeah. All right, I'm having really good luck foaming this out. This is 2-inch foam, so we use two pieces. And what I have in here is I throw in a sheet of paper, like in a corner, and then I throw in other sheets to fill the other corners, and then I tape them together. And so, hell yeah. So now here is the template that I can pull out, and now it's an odd shape, and then that fits perfectly in there. All right, hell yeah. All right, hell yeah. So we got this foamed out just a little bit, you know what I mean? And we'll finish it. But hell yeah, it's 4 inches of foam. And we got it in there as tight as possible. And so that's pretty sweet. Kind of bummed that I didn't think this ahead, but this was my flat section in here and I put another baffle. But hell yeah, I mean, if this works, I wouldn't do that. But I mean, obviously, this is just a test. And then I was just like, hey, I can't even sit in the cardboard, but now that I have this, hell yeah, I can just stand right on these surfaces because they're flat, and as long as I move to the other surface, hell yeah. And you can kind of see how this essentially works, you know what I mean? So if I'm back here, and then, well, I can only do one surface at a time, but hell yeah, let's see if we go forward and then onto the bow. Hell yeah. And if we were on the bow, then that's the release of the stern. And so, hell yeah. I don't know, it just makes a whole lot of sense to me just to have all these like dynamic little areas. So we'll see if on the water you can even feel those. Because we have found that on the water, if you have a stair step, for sure, that's money. But who knows if these might be too subtle. And even though we have a lot of rocker in the front, you know what I mean? Like from this location to this location, I want it to be actually fairly rockered. I can't even notice any difference. So if we go from here to here, I don't notice a difference. So it's kind of a bummer where, let's flip this upside down. You know what I mean? Like this profile right here, it's not enough anymore, So that's kind of a bummer. Where this is a little bit too much. And so that's just one of those things where if I want to, I'm going to come in afterwards and then foam out this, you know what I mean? Steepen that and then drop that with, foam and carve it out and then get the shape that I actually want. But so I think it's decent enough. All right, hell yeah. So yeah, it's looking pretty sweet. So that's the bow. I'm leaving 18 inches just because if that was the 18-inch tubes, that's kind of how it would look. And then I'm ready to get my cockpit set up. You know what I mean? Figure out exactly what height, I want. And then I guess just the cockpit in general. Once I get this foamed out, it'll be sweet because then I'll know like how to transition onto those edges. And we'll be able to do that. And because of this angle right here, I don't know, maybe I'll actually put like an anchor and then a rope all the way across to kind of hold that together, kind of hold that rockered shape right here. I don't know, I think it's a done deal, and that might just pull on the bow and stern. But all right, hell yeah. But yeah, I'm really interested in getting the cockpit fleshed out of how, like, it's going to be a no-thwart cockpit as well. So it's kind of like a 2-in-1. And we'll see if, I would imagine this boat's going to hit water, but we'll see. It doesn't have to. I just didn't think it was that expensive to start putting foam just in the floor because, you know what I mean? And then once I work out to the tubes, I'm just going to focus on one tube anyway, you know what I mean? So if I did get something that I could take to the lake, it would just be like one tube. But man, just being cardboard, the thing would just get waterlogged. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting. But seeing is believing, you know what I mean? So as I'm creating this and creating what I want, I think that is the most important part for me to be like, you know what I mean? the things in my head, do they make sense? You know, when I'm on the wave, I want this. And those are the things I'm actually looking at footage kind of daily to be like, yes, you know what I mean? What I found is that the boat loses edge. And so in all my footage, if something goes wrong, it's because the boat lost edge. Like I can paddle into something with edge, but then the boat tips, and then that upstream tube will catch water, and then it just messes with you. And so for sure, even on my boat, well, and that was footage from where I wasn't dynamically pushing out the floor, and so that's going to be the biggest thing is make sure we have that edge. And then also make sure we're sitting in a neutral position, because if you are edged and then you're just kind of feeling like you're tipping out, that sucks. And so hell yeah. And essentially this is supposed to be a boat that's 8 feet long. You know what I mean? So this is the guts of a boat that hopefully is 8 feet total length. You know what I mean? And so the runners will only hopefully stick out 8 feet. They could stick out farther because I'm thinking about just points, you know what I mean? Like if I do the paddle cat tube. Oh yeah, and then I was going to experiment this. So, you know, just thinking about this, just for my sake, I want to do the paddle cat front, and then, hell yeah, it's going to be the R1 dog. You know what I mean? Dogs up front, and then normal in the back. So hell yeah. Instead of like a paddle cat, you got your paddle dog. Hell yeah. A couple dogs up front. Who knows? You know what I mean? Got your pit bulls up front. Anyway, so that's what I was thinking. You got your paddle cat points up front. And because those actually work. That was the one thing from the Fat Cat experience at the lake where I was just like, yeah, when you jump to the front, man, just on that really high volume tube, you could just really carve your bow around. So for bow paddling, you know, especially if your rear is released, and if I am releasing half the boat, it's still good to have a decent, you know, tracking boat up front and something that can carve that turn. And so, but yeah, we'll see. Because the other idea was to not have a lot of volume in the front, but as long as that volume is high enough, this corner is going to be gone. You know, so that's going to be the main take home, especially in the bow, because it's an asymmetric boat and you would sit back there anyway. This is going to be the most vacated area compared to a normal boat, there and there. And so that is where, you know, heavy rocker on the paddle cat tubes, and they actually can be decent size because I do want them as sponsons. You know, if I am removing all this corner so it doesn't catch, like I still want that to engage like when I need it. And so the idea would be is if you were punching through a hole, this would be your bow that would climb over, and your other tubes would be, you know, up. Let's just exaggerate it and say they're up like a foot. You know what I mean? From that water line, let's say from that water line, typically the stair step is going to be 4 inches. And so these can be up another 8 inches. So so even exaggeration with a foot, I'm having those tubes right at that corner be like almost a foot off the ground. That means that if you jump to the bow, you're going to be more, and so that's going to be an interesting thing, because you could go 2 ways with the design. Is you could have a cupped front end and then a high rockered with a paddle cat design. And then when you jump to the bow, you're just on those paddle cat tubes, which are nice and stable. But I do think, you know, watching kayakers like boof a hole and then have their nose carry them through with that momentum down the bow, I think that would be pretty sweet. So that's what I'm looking for, is like boof a hole and then use your bow to skip. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of the term that the kayakers are using when running big holes, to skip your way through. And so essentially this is ready to skip, and then you have 2 paddle cat sponsons just in case. All right, so hell yeah. So I'm excited about this. And again, seeing is believing. We'll see what happens when I decide to be like, you know what I mean? Could we get this thing to float? We'll see. All right, booyah.